Okay, so we are starting this month. We're going to be starting from chapter 26. Okay, someone has a watch, by the way. I can use what? Okay. All right. The story goes like this. We know that the title page of the Tanya, right, is based on the pasuk that says Kikar v'lecha adaber ma'od beficha levavcha la'aseisa. Okay, that's the title page of the Tanya, and the entire book is based on that sentence. Now, in general, what we have is essentially two different tracks in terms of the Chabad approach. We have something that is known as the Derech Arucha, the longer approach, and then the Derech Kitzara and the shorter approach. Those are the two tracks. In general, we speak about Chabad Hasidus as being Derech Arucha v'Kitzara, a longer, shorter way. But in Chabad Hasidus itself, you also have the concept of the longer and the shorter way of Avodas Hashem. What is that? From chapter 1 through chapter 18, or I'd say until chapter 17, we have what is known as the longer approach, which means like this. I want to ideally serve Hashem in the best way. The best way that I can serve Hashem is to be a Beinani. A Beinani is someone who is Superman. Why do I say Superman? Because this person is able to control himself. He's able to control himself 24/7, 52 weeks of the year. He never loses. What does it mean to control himself? He controls himself in terms of his actions. He controls himself in terms of his speech, and he controls himself in terms of his thoughts. He is not in control of necessarily his emotions, right? And he's not in control necessarily of the thoughts that pop up into his head. But he is in control of, once the thought has come up into his head, where does he go with that? That is Superman. There are very few people alive that can say about themselves that they can control themselves for an hour, a day, a week, a month, forever. Very, very few. Okay? The question is, how do I become that person? How can I be a person who is in complete control of myself? That's my question. So Tanya says, from chapters 1 through 17, it is a holistic approach. The way it needs to happen is it's a slow but sure process of meditation. And this meditation, which is based on an intellectual contemplation of Hashem, about the world, about my soul, right? And by understanding what is really happening in this world, I will slowly but surely be able to use my head to control my emotions and to control my whole way of myself in order to make the right choices throughout my day and throughout my life. That is the basic long approach, the Derech Arucha of Chabad Hasidus. And that's what the Alter Rebbe spells out from chapters 1 through 17. The first few chapters, what does he do? He talks about introduction in chapter 1, showing why it's essential to learn Pnimius HaTorah. Pnimius HaTorah means more of the mystical aspects of the Torah, and that it's not two separate Torahs, i.e. mystical aspects versus the more revealed aspects, but in fact that we see that it is one Torah, right? And impossible to be without the combination of the two. Then you have chapters 2 through 5, talks about the Nefesh Elokis, right? After we're introduced to the fact that we have two souls in the first chapter. Chapters 6 through 8 talk about the Nefesh Bahamis, the animal soul. And chapter 9 talks about the war that happens between them. Chapter 10 talks about what is a tzaddik. Chapter 11 talks about what is a rasha. And then we are introduced to this Superman called the Beinani in chapter 12. Chapter 12 through 17 discusses how do I accomplish this in a holistic manner. That's what we're talking about over there. Along comes chapter 18. After chapter 18 comes along and tells me, wait a minute, I don't have the head for this. I can't sit and meditate. I'm not capable of it. I don't have the zitzfleisch. I'm having big problems meditating. I'm having big problems focusing. I have ADHD galore to the max. Does that mean that Judaism is not close to me? Does that mean that God is not close to me? Obviously it doesn't. So what am I supposed to do? So chapter 18 says, okay, throw everything we just said aside for the time being, and I'm now going to discuss a whole different method of accomplishing the same goal of how can I be in control of myself 24/7. Instead of having this holistic way, what I'm going to do is use the nuclear option. The nuclear option means, by the way, I made up that word, just in case you were wondering. It doesn't say anything about nuclear in here, okay? You guys have to laugh when I make these incredible jokes. Awesome. Okay, there we go. To push the button, you don't laugh, and then the sign, right? Okay, so the nuclear option, the way I call it, is like this. We have a part of our soul that is completely one with Hashem all the time and is never, the relationship is never impacted. If I could tap into that at any given moment, then I will be able to control myself at that given moment. That's called the yechida of the soul, right? And that we see, we see that in fact, that a person, even a person who goes against Yiddishkeit his whole life, given certain sets of circumstances, will give up his life for God across the board. Now, that makes no sense. How could a person that's going against Yiddishkeit, not religious at all, give up his life for God? And nevertheless, we see that. That's called Mesiras Nefesh. That's called self-sacrifice, right? And there, in that point, the fact that we have that is something that we can always access if we learn how. So chapters 18 through 25 is a methodology of how do I access this nuclear power plant that's in me always. And when I'm about ready to do some sort of sin that I should not be doing, I'm ready to do it right now. If I could just get some sort of power to override my natural inclination, I will be able to control myself. And in that way, I could also be in control of myself 24/7. So that is called the shorter way. I think Yossi Paltiel talks about it in terms of taking a Tylenol. You're not changing yourself. You're not fixing the disease. But for the moment, you're able to make things work. But then it just goes back to the normal way. So that's the difference between the longer and the shorter way. Right? That is the first 25 chapters of Tanya. And that sets the stage for where we are in chapter 26. Now, the Chassid comes back to the Alter Rebbe and he says, look, I've tried the longer way. I've tried the shorter way. I've tried everything. And it's still not going. Something's wrong. What do I do now? That's chapter 26. 26 through 34 begins an entire discourse about the idea of happiness and depression. And essentially, as we know, the Baal Shem Tov holds that depression is an avera, it's a sin from the Torah to have depression. Everything that we said up until 25 only works if a person is filled with happiness. If a person is being pulled by depression and worry, so then it's not going to work. So now we spend the next 8 chapters or so discussing how do I get that happiness? How do I get rid of the depression? How do I get rid of the different worries that trouble everyone that I know, at least? Okay, so that's where we are. Is that cool? Is that good? Okay.
there are times where depression is not an option. It's not necessarily something you could just snap out of. There are situations where it's something that requires more intensive care and attention. People who are trained to.
I don't know if we're talking about here medical depression in terms of like a a problem that a person would go to a psychologist for or a psychiatrist for and take medicine. I think we're talking about, and it could be that Alter Rebbe is talking about that. I'm not going to say either way, but I'm saying I think we're going to talk about the regular. Most people that I know, we go through our ups and downs in life, and during those times when we're down, you can call it depression, you can call it worries, you can call it going through a bad day, you can call it all of these different things, right? At the end of the day, this section is dealing with that. Could it be used for someone who has been diagnosed with clinical depression? I don't know. I'm not going to suggest that someone doesn't go to a doctor to take care of himself. I would definitely suggest them to, yes, go to a doctor. Could this help as well? I think it probably could help, but I don't know if this would be the only thing that could help. I don't know. I don't have enough background in that field to be able to make a.
I just wanted to qualify, maybe because sometimes, and when I was going through a hard time, it made me miserable to think that something that was almost against my will was actually causing a sin or some sort of a blemish.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, and when we say it's like a sin, when we say like the Baal Shem Tov, it's a little bit tongue in cheek. In other words, the point is that we have to understand that for the general population, right, that the idea of working towards happiness and what happiness is part of Avodas Hashem. And it's actually it's something that is in a certain way, it's a chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov in a certain way. I mean, if you would turn around and you would go and look at Jewish life in, let's say, Europe in the 1600s, the very religious people were not walking around all happy and whatever. They were very serious and they were in there like this. And the Baal Shem Tov really pushed this idea of being besimcha, and it's an avoda to be besimcha, and they were known as the Leibediker ones, and right, it was a very big novelty in the 1700s because it wasn't usually put together with religious Judaism. Nowadays, even the people that fought against the Baal Shem Tov, right? You go to any Orthodox group of Jews nowadays, they'll say, "Oh, mitzvah gedola liot basimcha tamid." It's a mitzvah. It's a great mitzvah to be happy all the time. It wasn't always that way. As much as people would like to say, "Oh, yeah, that's no, that was the Hasidic approach." It was a novel approach, and it was an approach that said that it's not something that comes necessarily naturally to people. It's something that a person has to work towards. And I think that that's maybe something that's interesting to point out, that maybe even in the secular world, it could be that people do think of happiness as being something that is something that should be natural, that it's something that I should just normally have. And what Hasidus is saying is that no, it's something that you have to work towards. It's an avoda. So it's not something that, and we all know, I mean, everyone, at least most of the people, if not all the people that I know in my life, right? We go through our ups, we go through our downs, and it's very easy to get tripped up when a person is down. That's the bottom line. But it's something that what Hasidus is bringing here is that how can we work through this? How can we go beyond? Right? Yeah. Okay, let's start. So we are on page 64 of the regular Tanyas, right? And it says like this, Perek Chavav, Bara. Kagon da tzarich lodei klal gadol, that a person needs to know a general rule. Ki kamoshe nitzachon lenetzach davar gashmi. Just like when a person wants to win out in a physical situation, kagon, for example, Shnei anashim misabkim ze im ze. Let's say that two people were wrestling one with the other. Lahakil ze ze. In order to essentially pin the other person. We used to play, some people probably were here, maybe you were on a wrestling team in high school, right? That The objective is to pin the other person. If one side is in a state of atzlus means laziness, v'kavdus means heaviness, yenutzach b'kal, he will be beaten easily, v'yipol, and he will fall. Gam imhu gibur yoser mechaveiro, even if he is even stronger than the other person. Kacha mamish, just like this, is benitzachon hayetzer, is how we are victorious over our yetzer haras. It is impossible, amazing word that he uses here, impossible to be victorious over our yetzer hara, which means at any time that your yetzer hara wants to cause you to do something that you shouldn't be doing, you will not be able to win out over it. Hanimshachos, when he is in a state of atzlus v'kavdus, hanimshachos, which where does this laziness and this heaviness come from? It comes from atzlus, which is known as depression, v'timtum halev ke'evan, and the dullness of the heart like a stone. Okay, so we're going to be dealing more with atzvus in chapters 26, 27, 28, and timtum halev in 29 and 30. Then he says, ki'im, only bizrizus, only with alacrity, hanim shakfas, which stems from misimcha, from happiness, mepesichas alev, from the openness of the heart, v'tihiraso, and its purity, mikol nidnu daiga, from any type of worry, va'atzu ba'olam, and any type of depression in the world. Now, this is a very interesting discussion that we have to have here. If you will turn, right, to page 33 in Tanya for a second, or 32, the end of 32. So in chapter 12, which is written on page 32, we are introduced, as I mentioned before, to the idea of the Beinani. Okay? And if you look at the end of the page, we're talking about that the Beinani is a person who is in control of himself constantly. And over here, he says, right, I'm just reading from the bottom of page 32, right, by the period, Rak mipnei shelo lo levado mishpat ha'melucha v'memshala be'ir, it's not able to, the yetzer hara is not able to bring out taivaso, his taiva, his desire for doing something wrong, mikayach el apayel, from a potential into actuality, lislabish be'evri agufa, in order to become enclosed inside the limbs of the body, but ma'isa dibur b'machshava, whether it's in action, whether it's in speech, or whether it's in thought, mamish, the next page, la'amik machshavaso b'tanuge olam hazeh, right, to really immerse one's thought into the pleasures of the truth. Why? Because why? Because by a person, his brain is shalit, which means to be in control or to educate, to be running the show. Al halev, on the heart. Bitoldoso, skipping the brackets, by the way it was born, v'teva yitziraso, and the natural way in which it was formed. Shekach noitzer ha'adam betoldoso, that is how a person is born. Shekol adam yokol b'ritzaino, every single person is able, according to what he wants, sheb'maychol lis'apek l'blimsho beruch, in order to be in control over the spirit of his desires of his heart, that he would be able to control anything that he wants to control inside of himself. In other words, we are all created in such a way that it goes according to our ratzon, according to our will. Whatever we want to be able to do with ourselves, we have control to do. That's how we were created. That's the nature of a human being. That's the nature of each individual in this room. That if you want to be able to accomplish something, you can do it. You can accomplish it. That's the ground rules. However, when you turn back to page 64, he says over here, however, there's one problem. The problem is that it's true that that is the nature of how I was created. But there's one thing that messes it all up. The one thing that can mess this whole thing up is when a person is in a state of laziness and heaviness. That's the one thing that can mess the whole thing up. That's the greatest agent of the Yetzer Hara, the greatest agent of everything negative and evil. Because as long as we are in control of ourselves, so then we're in good shape. It's once we start to lose control, that's when all the difficulties happen. So that's the example that the Alter Rebbe brings. He doesn't bring an example of someone that's shooting an arrow from fighting like that, or, shooting a gun from one, or artillery or a missile from one area to... He brings the example of two people that are wrestling, because the Yetzer Hara is our biggest enemy, and it's right here within each one of us. And he knows every single thing that I'm doing, right? There's so many funny stories and interesting stories about different tzaddikim or whatever, that they were going to go to this place or that place, and say, oh, the Yetzer Hara is here also. He even came with me to Siberia or wherever. The bottom line is that on the one hand, it's the Yetzer Hara is right there with you, and he's your biggest enemy. On the other hand, he's our best friend. Why is he our best friend? Because each one of us come to this world to fix things up, to change the world, to make the world into a better place. And we don't necessarily know where our specific role is in this world. I remember growing up, when you're a little kid or whatever, you don't really know where you're going to be. And even when you get older, you don't really know, like, what's my portion? What's my thing? But every single person in this room has a specific mission and why your soul came down into this world. And no two people are the same. Everyone has their own specific one. And your Yetzer Hara is there to try to challenge you every step of the way. Every single step. And you think that, I'm Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to Farbrengen next week for my birthday, I'm turning 55. I still think in my head, I'm like 16, whatever. But you think that the Yetzer Hara is the Yetzer Hara when you're 15 and 16 and 20 and 22 and when you're 55, the Yetzer Hara is as powerful as ever. That's the way God made the world. We're going to see it in chapter 27. Now, Alter Rebbe explains this idea. But on the other hand, by understanding what are the rules, understanding how to deal with it, understanding what is it that's blocking me from having success in life. The one thing that's blocking me is my Yetzer Hara. If I can understand that, and I could see that really I was born with this innate situation where I can be in control. And when I'm in control and things are flowing, then what do they call it nowadays? And you're in a flow state, right? Or whatever, right? Something like that. You're in a flow state. This is the opposite of it. So where does the negativity come from? Where does that negativity come from? So this is what he says here. It's when a person is acting in a state of atzlus. Atzlus means laziness. Laziness is from yeshus. It's from arrogance. That's where it comes from. Where he explains it in the beginning of the Tanya, in the first chapter, atzlus b'kavdus, which comes from the element of earth. It's a heaviness, right? And where does that stem from? It says it stems from the opposite of tahira, the opposite of purity, because purity means life. Tuma means death. That's what klipa is. It's death. That's what depression is. It's death. That's what we have to know. And that's what's our biggest struggle here. Because why? Because the simcha comes from where? From the psichas alev, from the openness of the heart, from the tahira, from the purity, from all different types of daiga, because that's a trust in Hashem. It's coming from the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Elokis, I'm going to finish with this. The Nefesh Elokis is one with Hashem. Hashem says, don't worry, I'm in control. I'm the bus driver here. You don't tell the bus driver where to go. He knows very well. You get on the bus, right? We go on a plane, right? I just came on a plane from Eretz Yisrael. I didn't go and interview the pilot and say, where did you exactly go to school to learn how to fly? We have this incredible trust. I don't think that there's anywhere in the world, in any of our lives, that we have as much trust. You go to a doctor, first thing you have to check, where did you go to school, and what did you do this, and did, you speak to like 15 other people that knew this doctor, whatever. For the pilot, no one knows who the pilot is. Oh, they go, this is Doctor, this is, Joe Schmo here in the pilots, and in the cockpit, we're cruising at 35,000 feet, like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And nevertheless, we're flying in this metal tube in the middle of 35,000 feet above the ground. Everyone has this incredible trust. This is the Nefesh Elokis. The Nefesh Elokis says, there's no doubt. There's only bitachon, there's only trust in Hashem. Hashem is the driver. Hashem is the pilot. Hashem is running the show. The Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Bahamis comes in and starts saying, what about this? And what's going to happen in this situation? It's all about suffix. It's all about doubt. It's all about confusion. It's all about what's if, and this is a problem, and that's a problem, and he doesn't like me, and he stepped on my toe, and then on and on and on and on. So the beginning of understanding how to move forward in life is this point, is recognizing who's talking in my brain. And where is it coming from? If it's coming from a state of atzlus, of laziness, of kavdus, which comes from an idea of atzlus, of depression, of heaviness, of, what's going to be, how can it work out, I know it's coming from the wrong place. And even if I'm sitting and learning and I'm doing all the right things, if I have that wrong, geht nicht, doesn't go. So this is the key. This is how the Alter Rebbe starts this whole section. The key is, I know that I have to be besimcha. And besimcha means work. Simcha means work. I have to work hard, because the natural state of my nefesh bahamis is, I want to give you problems. I want to give you problems. That's what he's saying to me. I'm going to give you a lot of problems. And you're going to be worried about, what if my check doesn't come in, and what if this one happens, and what if this happens, and this problem, and all these different things. And I want to do this, and I want to go after this taiva. And if I could only buy a Porsche, then my life will be just so special, everything will be different, right? Or if I'll only have a house, or if I'll only finish this final, or if I'll only, then all of a sudden, I remember when we were in college, it was always like, okay, just when I finish the midterms, then it's like going to be like, then I could relax. Well, then you have to write a paper. Okay, when I finish this paper, then, and then when you finish the finals, if I just finish, once I finish, it's always this other thing that, just one. Right now, right here, everything's fine. Everything's good. That's what it is. Okay, we have to develop this idea much more, but Mitzvah Hashem, we'll call it an end for today. Mitzvah Hashem.